Thank you for your interest in Case 23032, a request by Northwest Community Council to amend the Sackville Drive Land Use Bylaw to change the way building height is measured. The planner assigned to this case is Paul Sampson. This presentation will give you an overview of the proposal, the role of HRM staff, and an overview of the planning application process.
This land use bylaw amendment was requested by Northwest Community Council and would apply to all properties within the Sackville Drive secondary planning strategy area. The request is to consider amendments to the Sackville Drive land use bylaw to allow for the height of a building to be based on the mean grade of the building, not the lowest grade of the curb. The role of HRM staff is to manage the process of the planning application. We are the main contact for both the applicant and the general public regarding questions, comments, or concerns. We draft reports, negotiate with the applicant, and make recommendations to Council. Northwest Community Council will make the final decision on whether to approve or refuse the proposal. The purpose of this presentation is to provide information on the request, the planning process, and to gather feedback. Site context: Sackville Drive is the main road in Sackville, joining Middle Sackville with Highway 101. The area has a mix of uses, with many commercial uses, recreation and institutional uses, multi-unit residential developments, and serves as an access to many low-density residential developments. Sackville Drive runs parallel to Highway 101, and areas to the north of Sackville Drive are higher in elevation than the lower-lying lands to the south of Sackville Drive. The area in orange identifies the properties within the Sackville Drive plan area, which would be directly impacted by any land use bylaw amendments. The area in pink identifies properties within the Sackville plan area. The natural elevations of Sackville Drive result in conditions where the north side of the street is significantly higher than the south side. In this map, you can see the contour lines. Each red line represents a grade change of 5 meters, and it shows how the contour lines on the north side are closer together, which means a steep grade change. The contour lines on the south side are further apart, indicating lower elevations and a more gradual grade change. The photo on the left is a snapshot of Sackville Drive looking west toward Middle Sackville. You'll see commercial uses on both sides. To the left of this view are lower lying lands, and to the right of this view are higher elevated lands. The photo on the right is a snapshot of Sackville Drive looking east toward Highway 101. You'll again see commercial uses on both sides. To the left of this view are the higher lands, and to the right are the lands that slope down. In September 2006, Regional Council adopted amendments to the Sackville Drive secondary planning strategy and land use bylaw to permit buildings to a maximum of 50 feet from grade at front property line, and buildings over 50 feet by development agreement. Councilors expressed concern with the quality of development that could take place as of right, and that a development agreement option would give the community and council an additional level of oversight. Councilors supported the motion as they believed that the amendment put forward best represented the desires of the community at the time. A development agreement is a legal contract between a developer and the municipality and governs what can be built on a property. To get a development agreement, a property owner must apply for a planning application and demonstrate how their proposal meets policy. The application is decided on by council. On the slide, you'll see the policy as it was approved then and exists today. There are a number of other regulations in the Sackville Drive land use bylaw for buildings, such as building setbacks from property lines and lot coverage maximums. Each zone within the Sackville Drive secondary plan area has its own specific set of requirements for buildings. There are a few commercial zones that do not allow residential uses, which have yard setbacks that go as low as 0. However, 60 feet setbacks from rear and side yard that abut residential uses are required. In these zones, lot coverage maximums range from 50 to 80%. There are other zones that allow both commercial and residential uses, including multiple unit dwellings. These zones require side and rear setbacks ranging from 16 feet to half the height of the proposed building. In these zones, lot coverage maximums are 50%. None of these regulations in the land use bylaw are proposed to change with this application. Staff have chosen 3 sites within the Sackville Drive secondary plan strategy area that have been granted building permits in the last 5 years as examples to help visually represent the existing policy in action. 2 of these sites are located on the higher side of Sackville Drive, and 1 is located on the lower side of Sackville Drive. Each of these buildings were constructed to roughly 5 stories under the current policy, without creating building incompatibilities from the north to south sides of the street or causing detriment to lower density residential developments. These policies demonstrate the achievement of uniformity of building height from one side to another of Sackville Drive. 30 Baxter Drive is located on the high side of Sackville Drive and has frontage on Sackville Drive. A building permit was issued in 2020 to construct a new multi-unit dwelling with 54 residential units under the current Sackville Drive land use bylaw provisions. The building is currently under construction and was approved at 50 feet, which is 5 stories total, inclusive of underground parking. 249 Sackville Drive is also located on the higher side of Sackville Drive. A building permit was issued in 2015 to construct a multi-unit building with 72 residential units. The building was constructed under a development agreement. The development agreement regulates the building height to a maximum of 60 feet and no more than 4 stories. There are no step-backs required in the development agreement. However, there are provisions for buffering and screening. The building on site today is 4 stories high with a level of underground parking. 24 Sackville Cross Road is located on the lower side of Sackville Drive. A building permit was issued in 2016 to construct a multi-unit building with 36 residential units. The building was constructed under the Sackville Drive land use bylaw provisions. The building on site today is 4 stories high with a level of underground parking and no building step backs. Northwest Community Council is proposing to change how height is measured in Section 27A of the Sackville Drive land use bylaw. In doing this, building heights for all buildings in all zones across the plan area would be measured by an average of the established grade of the lot and no longer from the front property line. The HRM Mapping Department created visuals of what this change could look like if approved. We chose random vacant properties along Sackville Drive to illustrate what could be built if this change is approved. We chose properties on the higher side of Sackville Drive and one on the lower side. Keep in mind that depending on the slopes of the properties, the height results could vary, and this policy applies to and impacts all properties within the Sackville Drive plan area, not just those in the following illustrations. These are simply random examples. This view is looking to the northwest. The image on the left illustrates the building form that could be built under the current land use bylaw regulations on the properties, shown in green. Building height on this site would allow 1 to 3 stories under the current land use bylaw regulations on the higher side of Sackville Drive. On the lower, building height could be built at around 4 to 5 stories. The image on the right illustrates what could be built if the height measurement wording was changed in the land use bylaw. The same site on the higher side of Sackville Drive could be built at 5 to 6 stories. On the lower, building height could be built again to 5 to 6 stories. This view is looking northeast, showing the existing built form permitted and the proposed. View demonstrates the view from the lower side of Sackville Drive. You can see that the existing policy creates a box-like effect, resulting in buildings on the higher slopes being at the same vertical height as those on the road. This results in uniform building heights along Sackville Drive. The proposed policy would allow buildings to be higher than those fronting Sackville Drive for properties with higher slope and elevations. This view is from K Street, a residential street in behind Sackville Drive on the higher side. These residential properties' rear yards abut properties fronting Sackville Drive. This view is from Armoyan Drive, a residential street off of Sackville Drive that slopes down on the lower side. Some of these residential properties' rear yards abut properties fronting Sackville Drive. These images are all depictions of what the change in height definition could look like. Modeling illustrates that buildings at higher elevations with slopes would enable higher building heights and more density on the sites. For buildings at lower elevations with slopes, modeling illustrates less increase in height allowance. However, there may be other sites in the plan area that are at lower sloped elevations than those shown in illustrations, which may have more exaggerated results. For example, more or even reduced height allowances than permitted under current policy. This slide provides an overview of the planning application process. After an application is submitted, the proposal is circulated to various reviewers and reviewed by the planning department. The next step is public consultation, and that's where we are at now. After the consultation, the details of the proposed land use bylaw amendment will be finalized, and a staff report with a policy review and recommendation is written. The application will then be presented to Northwest Community Council for first reading. If Council decides that they want to consider this application, a public hearing will be held. At the public hearing, members of the public are invited to share their thoughts on the proposal. Council will then make a decision about whether to approve the application. Once their decision is made, there is a 14-day appeal period.
I encourage you to share your thoughts and ask questions about this proposal. Are you in support or opposed to this proposal, and why? Comments and questions can be emailed to Paul Sampson at sampsop@halifax.ca, or you can call him directly at 902-717-8125.
And that concludes the presentation today. Thanks for listening.